Hey everybody, what's up? I hope everything's cool. Everything's going right in your life. All right, the name of this video is going to be Philosophy and Science of God. Philosophy and Science of God. The reason for this video is due to a conversation I had with a young man who told me that God didn't exist. He was an atheist. He told me God didn't exist. And I said, well, anyway, one thing led to the other in the conversation. And he was telling me how nature is everything and we should follow nature and use nature as an example as how to act. Well, I told him, well, that didn't make any sense to me. And so he was talking about animals do this and animals do that. And I told him, well, animals clean their privates by licking their privates. Are you going to do that? Just to show how ridiculous the conversation is. And I also told him that if we evolved from animals, then to duplicate what animals are doing now would be to go backwards instead of forward, which makes no sense. So anyway, the conversation went on, and of course, I didn't change his mind. I mean, when a person is, I mean, it's hard to change people's mind. And in fact, I don't want to change your mind, but I do want to give you something to think about. And I like to be factual. So I told him that the only thing that a person can deny is their concept of what they think God is physically. Now, if you think God is a white man riding around on a cloud, well, that's physically impossible. And I would have to agree that your concept of God does not exist. But anyway, let's get to the meat of what I want to talk about. When I say a concept, I'm talking about hypothesis. And let me read you the definition of an hypothesis. A tentative insight into the natural world, a concept that is not yet verified, but that, if true, would explain certain facts and phenomena. Let me repeat that part. If true, would explain certain facts and phenomena. A scientific hypothesis that survives experimental testing becomes a scientific theory. Now, when you test it, even if you can't prove it, if you test it and you can't prove it, it has to be at least a theory. Now, until the hypothesis is tested, it cannot be denied. Therefore, it is unscientific for a scientist to be an atheist. It is unscientific for a man of science to be an atheist. God would have to be at least a theory to that man, and he would have to be at least an agnostic. Even if he concludes that the world started with a Big Bang theory, there would still have to be a cause that created the Big Bang theory. So even the Big Bang theory cannot deny the existence of God. So what are the characteristics of God that we all agree with? Okay, the first, and these aren't in order, is that God has to be omniscient, which means God has to be all-knowing. God has to be omnipresent, which means God has to be everywhere. And God also must be omnipotent, which means God must be all powerful. So these are the three characters. And these three characters must be placed within a logical concept that can take us from the known to the unknown. They have to be placed within a logical concept that can take us from the known to the unknown. So we're not talking about daydreaming and, oh, God is a unicorn and all this, or a white guy riding a cloud. We're out of that nonsense. We have to come up with with a a conclusion that will encircle or make possible the characteristics that we give to God. And so I asked my friend, I said, have you ever had a dream? And did those dreams seem real? So to prove his point, of course he'll say anything. So he said, no, I've never had a dream that felt real. So I asked him, have you ever had a nightmare? He had to say yes. Then I asked him, has he ever had a wet dream? He had to say yes. So where I'm going with this is that when I search for truth in an effort, not so much to find God, but just to find truth. And if you find truth, what's in truth will be there. And so in searching for truth, it led me to what's called Hermetic philosophy. Hermetic philosophy. Not religion, philosophy. And the premise was, or the hypothesis, if you want to use that, is that God is infinite living mind. God is infinite living mind, meaning that we live in the mind of God, created by God meditating within his mind is where we exist. So, if we exist in the mind of God, could God be omniscient, all-knowing? Of course. And he can also be the creator of everything that goes on, which can lead to a conversation of determinism and free will. If we live in the mind of God, you can also say that God is omnipresent, everywhere, inside us and outside of us. And we can definitely say God is omnipotent, because God would have the ability to control his dream through meditation. That is according to Hermetic philosophy. Now, whether you believe that we live in the mind of God or not is irrelevant, because the theory is possible. The theory is possible unless you can come up with a way to deny the theory. And to deny the theory, you would have to deny that God is omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent. The three qualities we give to God. You would have to prove that God did not have those qualities. And that would just about do it. But let's go back to well, that wouldn't do it, because that's impossible. Now, the proof of God is the fact that that's impossible. Because if God exists, the proof of God is our inability to reach out to God physically, but to know God mentally. The proof that this is true is the fact that if God exists, the proof of God is our inability. The proof is our inability to prove that God does not exist within our minds. And we're not going to be able to do that because we cannot reach out to touch God physically, but we can know God mentally. And I came upon God, and I had an experience that God exists, not through looking for God, but through my search for truth. So now let's go back to the definition of hypotheses to bring this to a circle. Hypothesis: a tentative insight into the natural world, a concept that is not yet verified, but that, if true, would explain certain facts and phenomena. If not true, would explain certain facts and phenomena. And it proves the characteristics of God. That God is omniscient, that God is omnipresent, and it proves that God is omnipotent. It proves that. Now, a scientific hypothesis that survives experimental testing. A scientific hypothesis that survives experimental testing becomes a scientific theory. Now, we can't prove this with the five senses, but we can prove it mentally, the same way we prove numbers mathematically. The same way we prove numbers mathematically. We can prove the existence of God with the three hypotheses that God is omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent. And with that, have a great day. If you disagree, leave me a comment, and we can wrestle with this all day. So with that, have a beautiful day. God bless, and I'll be on my way.